So, Nick and Dusk, what are your thoughts on A Quiet Place?
All right, so
Day
so how
one.
many? All right, so chat. How many people here watched The Quiet Place back in what was it 2017, and said that wow, this movie's apocalypse is so well set up. It has such good world building. The rules of it are very very clear, understandable. But it the real charm of that first movie was the emotional family drama of it about this family that is dealing with this very tragic loss at the beginning of the film and uh and learning about the allegory of sacrifice and what it means to be a parent, to love somebody so completely that you'll give anything and everything you can in order to provide a better future for them. How many people watched that movie and said, I wonder what day one of this looks like?
Mm. And I know it was Quiet Place Part 2, they already
Hmm.
did something kinda like that where they did a
Hmm.
flashback
Yeah.
to the very first
Hmm.
day of what happened there.
Yeah, and while I like that sequence, and while I gave the A Quiet Place Part 2 a very positive review when I first saw it, upon a revisit, I think the movie is a much more flawed and a much more and much more of a film that feels like it was just made because the first one made money. It was a huge hit. We have to make more of these, while also giving John Krasinski a chance to show off some different skills as a director. Like this oneer that you're on, it's like a very cool set piece, but a cool set piece is just that unless it has some weight. It pushes the narrative of the film forward. And besides learning about the context of what day one of the apocalypse looked like, and just briefly introducing Killian Murphy's character in the prologue, this kind of is just something cool to watch, something cool to see. It doesn't really add anything to the film's main story arc.
Mm, okay. Dusk, what about you?
I actually echoed Nick's sentiment over the second movie fairly well.
Mhm.
If I think the sequence is a nice sequence, it feels like a roller
Mhm.
coaster ride for
Mhm.
that aspect of it. And to kind of move forward to this one, going even further back,
Mhm.
I feel like unfortunately they make some key mistakes
Mm.
that really keep it from being a good prequel or a good
Mhm.
culmination of the idea that they set up in the very first one. The reason the first one worked out so well is because we didn't know anything.
Mhm.
We just this is just what the world is. This is what's happening. We get all the context clues of a very unique premise where everyone
Mhm.
is quiet and
Mhm.
there's very little dialogue because they have to be.
Yeah,
And
and we have this family that really seems set up very uniquely suited to this apocalypse.
right. They're prepared for it. They do
Mhm.
as much as they can and things kind of fall apart and then it ends in a very sad but satisfying way
Mhm.
that sets up what could have been a sequel that they follow up. That mostly succeed in a lot of ways, but ultimately, sometimes also
Mhm.
is pretty flawed, unfortunately. And really did only feel like it was a sequel because the first one did so well.
Mhm.
This one feels like a similar extension.
Mhm. I kind of
Mhm.
agree with you there that the
I like
entire
that quote.
reason.
Somebody said, "Shut the fuck up and go see this movie immediately." Wasn't it Jay Hamilton, is the guy's name, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
from
there was a dude in my theater who was like really loudly like reaching into his popcorn, and I saw this movie in D box, so my chair was shaking throughout the whole thing,
You Be
and
Good.
I almost yelled at this dude, "Hey, shut the fuck
Mhm.
Oh, man. But the creature would have came and got you first then. You were yelling. The
up!"
creature would have came and got you, man.
You know what? Worth it. But I think to an extent, Dust, you're kind of right that this was a movie that was made purely because the first two movies made money. Paramount's kind of looking for their new franchise. They have a video game that's coming out set in the Quiet Place world, but something I think that was very smart is that John Krasinski stepped away from this and they handed the directing reins to and writing to Michael Sarnowski. And Sarnowski's was the director and screenwriter for one of my favorite movies from a couple years ago, which was Pig. And something
Yeah.
that movie did so well was it had this, very on paper, very just John Wick, but with a pig premise. But what it really was about studying was about a character study of a man going through grief and looking for that last semblance of hope. And without giving too much away, I feel like he's delving into similar things with this film. About I'm trying to be as vague as I can.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The themes in this movie definitely touch a lot more on a theme of grief,
and
pain,
and
and
also
the
and
end of
also
things.
inevitability,
Yeah.
but just by nature of this movie being a prequel, because we know how this is, going to end for most of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that ties into at least one of the main characters' arcs in this film beautifully.
Hmm.
So in this movie, you got Lupita Nyong'o in here. You have Joseph Quinn. Lupita Nyong'o, people know from a variety of things. 12 Years
Mhm.
a Slave. There.
Yeah, Oscar winner for 12 Years a Slave, Us, Queen of Katye, Black Panther.
Yes. So she's got a good resume there. Joseph Quinn, who people know he was in Stranger Things. He was Eddie in that.
Mhm.
You also have Alex Wolff in this, and then you have Jimon Hansu, who he's returning because he was in the second Quiet Place
Mhm.
film there. So he's returning to the Quiet Place universe there. And then you have Elena Umari there, who's also in this. So that's the four main principal people you see in this movie.
Mhm.
Okay. How do they do?
Yeah, they're all listed, but you really mostly follow Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn. Alex Wolff is briefly in the first act of this movie, but uh, he leaves very quickly. And
Okay.
something that I think this movie does really well is the movie, like both Quiet Place movies, the tension is absolutely palpable because the sound design in this movie is so good that you can basically hear a pin drop and you're just waiting with bated breath every time the creatures are used.
Mm, okay. So with this movie, being like you said, it being a prequel, introducing you when the creatures first kind of drop.
Mhm.
I mean, how much of it is kind of what we've already seen before with the first two Quiet Place movies of seeing these creatures, seeing people run from these creatures, seeing people hide from them, fight them? How much of a difference
Mhm.
is it in this, or if it's just kind of more of the same as the
So
other sequels?
that's where ultimately my problem aligns with this
Mhm.
movie. At first, it's everything that you'd expect it to be.
Mhm.
This is when they first arrive, without discussing much characters. The character Lupita Nyong'o plays Sam, and
Mhm,
she's coming back from something very important, and she's making her way into Manhattan in New York. On her way
Mhm.
there, that's when these aliens arrive and asteroids slash meteors start landing in New York, and out pop aliens, and just chaos ensues.
Mhm.
mm,
Unfortunately, and then in that midst of it, you'd want, oh, well, how are you going to figure out? Because everything's chaos right now, and the aliens are attacking everywhere. You kind of figure, where does it eventually put the pieces together? You'd figure, oh, where do we learn how to be quiet? What are the situations that set up that quiet is like being quiet allows them to get through? And the biggest problem with this movie is it's like they skip over that part.
Mhm.
They absolve that and go, well, we're not here to actually do a puzzle solving and survival
Mhm.
and in that aspect.
Well,
We're just going to
well,
kind of bypass that and
well,
eh.
I didn't really have a problem with
Mm,
them kind of skipping over the characters in this, learning about the rules of the world, because I feel like if they did that, that would have just made the movie unnecessarily longer. And ultimately, the movie really isn't about survival. It's about just trying to get that one last good memory uh, and shit, I'm really trying to not talk about what the movie is actually talking about. But there is a theme about death and the inevitability of it. And I feel like that's about all I can say without full on spoiling the character for it's talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask. So compared to kind of other great prequels that we've had, something like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, even though we know what's kind of gonna come already, does this movie do a great job at establishing the characters there and then making you care about them? I mean, I know these are a whole new set of characters, except for Jimon Hansu, who we already know where he's gonna kind of end up there. Does it kind of do a good job at that, at being a prequel of kind of setting that kind of world up and then?
That's not what it tried to be.
Yeah, because this isn't a prequel that's about tying into the previous movies that came before it. It's not about trying to tie into A Quiet Place or A Quiet Place Part 2. It's not introducing, like, giving a shout out or a cameo to John Krasinski or Emily Blunt in that movie. It's telling its own story within the world just on the first day of this apocalypse.
Okay. All right.
In all honesty, it could have taken place at any other time. It didn't even have to be in the very beginning of the movie, which is a problem. I like, regardless of how I feel about the movie's story, which I actually do quite like. I think the actors are good. They're very strong performances. I like the chemistry between the characters. I like the dynamics. That's fine. All that's good. I even like the story and the theming. I think that's fine. Aside from a few moments where I'm like, why you, with the destination in particular where they want to go, a certain character wants to go to, you go, why? And then even when you discover why, you're like, okay, but are they even open? you're like, I think we got other things to worry about. But accepting the theme of the movie, you kind of put that aside. It feels much more, instead of where the other movies were more logical, or at least tried to be, but even that logic had its own problems.
Well, really, it was the first one to try to be logical.
Yeah,
part two kind of has no excuse.
No, it doesn't. So it kind of continues the tradition of them kind of throwing out the logic a bit, quite a bit, and progressing forward. This movie could have taken place any part in the universe of it, and it would have had similar effects. The fact that it's using the beginning of it as a theming is probably its strongest suit, but ultimately, this story isn't about the begin. It isn't about connecting to the other movies in a character sense. It's more about using that first event to tell a story of inevitability. And that's both where it's strongest and also where it, as a prequel, unfortunately kind of feels weak. It's both its greatest strength and weakness.
All right. So I feel like me and Dusk can't really talk about this without going into spoilers. So with permission, I'd like to give my final thoughts. Give the chat a break because the movie just came out. Give them a break to mute this for a bit before we get into it. But I'd like to talk about the stop dancing around me being so vague about this movie.
Well, because I haven't seen it. But I guess that's fine. I guess give you a rating.
Okay.
And then you can go into spoilers there.
All right. So for me, I feel like with any good horror movie, the biggest thing you can ask for is, am I, just tense in my seat? Am I holding my breath whenever there is a scare happening on screen? Am I invested in characters that this movie is talking about? Am I, still thinking about the themes, days after I've seen the movie? To every single one of those questions, I gotta say, hell yes, I am. I loved the character the performances by Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn. I love the themes that this movie is talking about, and this movie could have rested on both of those, but the horror and how the creatures are used are some of the best set pieces in this whole franchise. Every scene is used so perfectly. The sound design in this movie is excellent. I can't recommend not seeing this in anything but the best theater you can. If D-Box is an option where you are, go. Okay. So for me, I had such a good time with this movie. I got to give it peak.
Peak. Okay. All right. What about you, Dusk?
When it when it works as a
Mhm.
story being told in these characters, which is actually quite often.
Mhm.
When the chemistry between the characters and the horror that's around them, and on that merit alone, taking away Quiet Place, the franchise, and just telling it as a story of this event, and aliens
Mhm.
show up, and this is a story being told. I think that works when it's at its best. It's the bottleneck movie with these two characters. Sans also another character that's a cat, but
Mhm.
uh, regardless, I think that's when it's at its strongest and is able to tell the story it wants to say. When you get into the logic of it, when you get into more details of it, it kind of starts to fall apart. But those two performances, the theming behind it, and what it's trying to say, I think ultimately hold it up. And the horror that they try and honestly succeed for a lot of it, and the environment and the creepiness and the sound design, I think hold it up just enough that it gets by regardless of the flaws
Mhm.
around it.
Yeah,
With that, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Even if it is a flawed movie, I
Mhm.
can't deny that it's a great time to watch.
Right. So with that said, I can't give it as high as you put it,
Mhm.
Nick, but this is still a strong tune in. This is
Mm.
still movie worthy, going to theaters and checking it out. No doubt about it. This is definitely a strong tune in, despite some of the flaws that it has and some of the issues I had with it. But it's if you can see it in a theater, please do. I think you have a
Mhm.
really good time.
Okay. All right. So Nick and Dusk are going to do a spoiler talk there for Quiet Place.
Mhm.
Day one. Just tune out for a bit. Probably what 5-10 minutes there. Probably five
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah. Go ahead and put it on the clock for 5 minutes, starting 3, 2. All right, now. So the biggest thing with Lupita Nyong'o's character is she is in hospice. She is
Mhm.
dying of cancer, and the whole reason that she goes to New York is with this, this little group that she has at her hospice center, going to see a show in the city. And her entire reason for going is she just wants to get one last slice of pizza at this pizza place that her dad used to take her to when she was younger. Her dad, who also passed away from, I'm guessing, a similar condition. And when she
Mhm.
meets Joseph Quinn in the movie, it's after another event where the creatures attack. He's like very disheveled. He runs into her. They kind of get to talking, and they have a connection that I think beautifully parallels one in the first movie, where they're like having this like cathartic screaming match under the cover of thunder.
Mm.
And bit leading up to that is some beautiful acting, especially when I can fully understand every character's motivation and arc, and every character's intention without the use of dialogue, because they do kind of cheat a little bit where characters whisper, but for the most part, especially between the second and third act, it's mostly a film without any spoken dialogue.
Mhm.
And something that I thought was beautifully told about this movie is because Lupita Nyong'o goes on this journey to get her last slice, knowing that this is a one-way trip for her. If she can go out on her own terms, then it will all have been worth it. But then she meets Joseph Quinn, and it gives her one last bit of hope, one last act of kindness, and say, okay, I'll get my slice. Thank you. I will help you escape. I'll help you get out of the city. And ultimately, he
Mhm.
does.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, that's ultimately where the story in itself I'm fine with. It
Mhm,
works, and I think it they tell it very well. Uh, when you consider it as a prequel to the movie, to
mhm,
prequel to what is, that's where it ultimately kind of fails. If
mhm.
that was the intention, it
Yeah,
succeeds in one
yeah,
way, fails in
yeah,
another.
yeah. The only way I think this movie would get, kind of shit on like that is if
Mhm,
this wasn't a prequel. If this was the first Quiet Place movie, I feel like this would have absolutely sung.
mhm. I think at the end of the day, and that part where trying to get the pizza, and all that. That's the part where I'm like, why? Like, even when I understand, like, they even gonna be open. What's the logic of this? And she comes like her character comes off extremely cold.
Mhm.
and it works in that tension because at first you're like, why? You're just so unlikable and mean and bitter. And it's because, but eventually through interaction with other people, she warms up and eventually warms up because she's been in hospice. It's been in this, and that's kind of, she's put up just this cold front of,
Yeah,
everyone's like, oh, the world's about to end and I'm going to die. And she's like, first time.
and
It's kind of like,
that's
I've been there for a while.
and that's kind of the funny thing about her character in the movie, because everybody's kind of freaking out and it's like, I'm still getting my pizza.
Yeah, she's like, she walks in a world that she could have been dead at any moment anyway. And so for her, it's nonplussed. It doesn't matter. But it's through other characters that she learns to like, hey, like live, like, hey, maybe like calm down a second and don't act like it's all over. And how selfish that is to live a life and that's over, even when you're in pain. The themes are good, and it did remind me a lot. Nathan brought it up, and themes that Pig brought up, which is why I like the movie so much. It really is helped by just the actors involved. So
yeah, in the hands of any two other actors or even two lesser actors, this movie would have absolutely failed on every level.
The writing was strong and the character delivery did it well. The only failure in which it comes down to is, again, logical problems within the story in itself, and it being a prequel to an already established franchise. But aside from that, the story, self-contained, its own story, it's a strong, I stand by it, strong, tune in. Definitely check it out. It's more unique, especially when considering prequels. It's very unique.
Yeah, and also because the movie ends with Lupita dying, but she goes out like a fucking G.
She really does.
Yeah, because she's walking through the streets of New York. She's like,
hey, don't spoil. He needs to see it.
Oh, god damn it! All right. I'm done.
Hey, let him have something.
Peak.
Yeah, so that was 5 minutes right there. Exactly 5 minutes. Just under that. Just a little bit above that. So yeah, that was Nick's and Dust review for A Quiet Place, day 1 there. In theaters now. Check it out.
In theaters.
Right. Any news about them making another one?
Yeah, they've talked about it.
Yeah,
if this does well enough.
Yeah, they've talked about doing other movies. They have a video game that I think is coming out for. It's kind of like an Alien Isolation, but set in the Quiet Place world,
which easily can work.
Oh, 100%.
There's also Jurassic Park doing an Alien Isolation thing too.
Awesome.
Yeah. Place the road ahead. That's what this is. Yeah. So you have this trailer PS5. So yeah. Well, they have to finish out the trilogy, right? They gotta do, because they haven't done a third one yet with Emily Blunt. So they probably want to do a third one for her.
After that point, they could honestly just keep going with side stories. There's enough here of a premise. They could continue with small bottleneck stories that don't cost a lot of money.
Yeah, it's kind of like what they. It's kind of like what they did with The Walking Dead when it first came out, where before the season premiere, they kind of had like little shorts set in the world.
Do you guys kind of like these type of games, Alien Isolation kind of type things?
Oh, Alien Isolation was one of my favorite games of the year.
Oh, I love these kinds of games. I hate playing them because my blood pressure rises like crazy.
I love these types of games. I enjoy playing them. They're fun. They ride that line on being frustrating, but
oh shit!
Yep. That's all it takes, man.
The latch did nothing, but the glass, death sentence.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, I'm gonna pull up notes for this other review here, Kinds of Kindness, and we'll go ahead and review that. Then we move on to trailer discussions here, and I see a lot of people on right now. Viper Fox is on, Tiger Woods, get people to raid after the stream here. But I'm gonna be checking it out this weekend, hopefully before Sunday.
Sunday.